I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? You walk out your front door, you look at your neighborhood, your city, your entire country, and you realize that mathematically, legally, you and everyone you know own exactly 0% of it.
Right. It's an incredibly sobering thought.
I mean, literally not a single inch of the dirt beneath your feet actually belongs to you in the eyes of the global economy.
Mhm.
You are, for all intents and purposes, a permanent guest in the land of your ancestors. And the landlord has already leased the ground out from under you to some, massive multinational cartel.
And the staggering reality is that for millions of people across Southern Africa, well, that isn't just a thought experiment. It is the absolute codified legal structure of their daily existence.
Yeah.
We are talking about an entire architecture of dispossession,
Yeah.
and it operates completely in plain sight.
And that architecture is exactly what we're dismantling today. So welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be back. We have a lot to cover today.
We really do. Over our previous sessions, looking at that massive stack of research we've labeled Pod 1 through 6, we've really been charting the dual crises paralyzing Southern Africa.
The spiritual and the economic.
Exactly. On one hand, we've looked at the terrifying spiritual underground, the reality of those dark killing orders demanding blood and life force just to secure temporary wealth. And we contrasted that sharply with the clean, self-accountable, life-preserving oath of the 30K Club.
Right, which is a massive distinction.
Huge. And alongside that spiritual crisis, we mapped out the grim macroeconomic survival statistics. We talked about a massive youth bulge entering a totally dead job market.
Yeah.
Millions trying to survive on, what was it, less than $2 a day.
Less than $2 a day, yes.
Yeah. And the profound, agonizing difference between merely surviving and actually living.
And those earlier sessions, they were foundational. I mean, they provided the necessary context we needed. We established the who, the what, and the why of the region's extraction. We saw how literally trillions of dollars in value are systematically siphoned out of the continent, while the local populations are left managing the daily trauma of inflation and just, a skyrocketing cost of a basic food basket.
Just trying to buy bread.
Exactly. And we established that the elite maintain this immense wealth, not just through clever accounting, but through highly structured spiritual and financial mechanisms.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we've covered the symptoms and we've covered the spiritual underworld. But today, our mission shifts. We are setting our sights entirely on the final stack of sources, what we call Pod 7.
The final hurdle.
Yeah. We are moving past the daily cost of living, and we are looking past the immediate spiritual oaths. We're drilling down into the literal bedrock, the land beneath our feet.
Because according to this final dossier, land ownership is the ultimate foundational issue.
Right. Every single economic disparity, every ounce of cartel power, it all traces back to who holds the title deed to the dirt.
But before we cross that threshold, I think it is critical that we set the parameters for how we are analyzing this.
Oh, absolutely.
The material in Pod 7 deals directly with highly contentious geopolitical frameworks. I mean, it dissects the policies of sovereign governments, the operations of massive international cartels, and deeply contested theories of land reform.
Yeah, it gets heavy.
It does. So our role here is strictly analytical. We are acting as impartial guides to the structural logic presented in these documents. We are not advocating for left-wing nationalization, nor are we, championing right-wing free market deregulation.
Right. We aren't taking sides here at all.
Exactly. We are not launching political attacks on specific administrations or endorsing any particular regime.
We're just reading the architectural blueprints of this economic engine to see exactly why it runs the way it does.
Right.
We are holding up a mirror to the facts, the mathematical realities, and the systemic arguments laid out in the text for you.
That's our only objective today.
And the goal for this deep dive is absolute clarity. By the end of this conversation, we will have covered every single angle of this final source. You'll understand precisely why the political war for land is fundamentally rigged.
And more importantly, why the text insists there is absolutely nothing standing between a person who needs the clean ritual backing of the 30K Club and checking their eligibility today.
Yes. So to orient us, the source material introduces an incredibly useful analogy to visualize the entire national economy. It asks us to imagine the country as a giant pizza.
It sounds elementary at first, I know, but it is actually a devastatingly accurate way to map macroeconomic power.
I love a good food analogy.
Well, when you look at southern Africa, you are looking at a region that possesses vast, almost unfathomable agricultural and mineral wealth. It is a massive, rich pizza.
Yeah.
So if you want to understand why there is crushing systemic poverty sitting right on top of world-class copper belts and diamond reserves, you have to examine how the pizza is divided.
You have to look at the slices.
You have to ask who gets the massive slices loaded with every topping, who is left fighting over the crusts, and who actually owns the cardboard box the pizza came in.
So to answer that, the text divides the actual physical land of these nations into three distinct categories. Let's look at the crust first.
The crust is what they call the general public.
Right, which resides on communal or customary land. We are talking about the vast majority of the population here. Millions upon millions of everyday citizens, generational farmers, entire extended families.
And this land is traditionally overseen by chiefs, local kings, or community councils.
But there is a massive invisible wall surrounding this category. The people living there do not hold formal, legally recognized title deeds. They just have a traditional right to exist there.
And that absence of a title deed is the linchpin of the entire economic blockade.
How so?
Well, a title deed is not merely a bureaucratic receipt. In the architecture of modern globalized capitalism, a legally enforceable title deed is the singular mechanism that converts physical dirt into liquid capital.
Okay, wait, explain that conversion.
On customary land, an individual might have a profound multi-generational historical right to build a home, graze their cattle, plant their crops.
Sure. Their grandfather lived there, their father lived there.
Exactly. The community recognizes their right, the local chief recognizes it, but the global financial system does not.
Because there's no piece of paper.
Right. To a capitalist bank, that land is completely invisible. It is dead capital.
Wow. Okay, then you move to the second category of the pizza, which is the government or state land. This is relatively straightforward, right?
Yes. These are the national parks, the massive wildlife reserves, military installations, and public buildings.
So the state apparatus holds direct ownership over these tracts, which brings us to the third category.
And this is where the toppings are concentrated.
The pepperoni, the extra cheese.
Exactly. And where the true economic friction operates. We are talking about big corporations and elites holding private, freehold, or concession land.
So this is land fortified by strictly enforced legal title deeds, or through these impenetrable, multi-decade commercial leases granted directly by the state.
Yes. This is the acreage utilized exclusively for high-yield commercial profit. Industrial mining, massive export-driven agriculture, luxury real estate.
Let's follow that pizza analogy through because I think it perfectly captures the trap here. The monopolies and the global cartels own the massive slices with all the toppings. That's the freehold land.
Right.
The government owns the cardboard box holding everything together. And the general public is crammed onto the crust.
It's a bleak picture.
But it's actually worse than that. It's like playing a game of Monopoly. But before you even roll the dice, one player already owns all the hotels, and you're just renting the space to stand on the board.
That is a very apt comparison.
The cartels have structured the legal system so that you can only buy or sell toppings if you have a special legal certificate, the title deed. So the people on the crust have all this labor, all this energy, but because they don't have the certificate, they can't even trade with the rest of the box.
They are entirely walled off. Taking that structural blockade a step further, just consider what happens when a farmer on customary land wants to transcend subsistence farming.
Okay, let's play this out.
Let's say this farmer is incredibly hardworking, studies modern agronomy, and realizes that with a heavy-duty tractor and a modern irrigation pivot, they could increase their yield tenfold and actually supply a regional market.
They want to scale up. Makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
To do that, they need a significant capital injection. They need a bank loan.
Right.
So they walk into a modern commercial bank and present their brilliant business plan. The bank asks for collateral. The bank needs an asset they can legally repossess and liquidate if the farmer defaults on the loan.
But the farmer can't offer the land as collateral because it's communal. The chief technically oversees it.
Precisely. The bank cannot foreclose on a piece of customary land and evict a traditional community. The legal framework simply doesn't allow it.
So the bank's hands are tied.
Therefore, the bank categorizes the farmer as an unmitigated risk and denies the loan. That farmer, regardless of their work ethic, their intelligence, or the fertility of their soil, is instantly locked out of commercial scale.
They're just stuck.
They are condemned to farm only what they can physically manage with hand tools or basic animal traction. This isn't an accident. It is the mathematical consequence of withholding title deeds. You have the raw material, but you have zero financial velocity.
Zero financial velocity. That phrase perfectly captures it. The public is essentially trapped on this communal land, expending massive amounts of physical calories just to tread water.
Exactly. Just surviving.
So if they are locked out, where is the actual wealth of these nations flowing from? I mean, this is where the dossier gets incredibly granular. It provides an exact mathematical breakdown of land ownership across southern Africa, and the numbers are absolutely staggering.
The math is where the illusion really falls apart.
Let's start by looking at the statistics for South Africa.
The structural disparity in South Africa is profound. It's driven by deep historical legacies that have cemented into modern economic moats.
What do the numbers say?
According to the data provided, the general public is largely concentrated into roughly 13 to 14% of the national landmass, primarily the former homeland areas.
13 to 14% for the general public.
Yes. And these specific regions are characterized by intense overcrowding, massive soil degradation from overfarming, and systematic impoverishment.
Okay, and the rest?
Now, contrast that with the commercial agricultural sector. The text notes that somewhere between 72 to 77% of all registered commercial farmland is owned by corporate entities, massive trusts, and incredibly wealthy private individuals.
Up to 77% of the registered farmland is in the hands of the elites.
It's heavily concentrated.
That is an almost unbelievable concentration of the country's caloric and export power. But then I read the section on Zambia, and my initial reaction was total confusion.
The Zambian numbers always catch people off guard.
The text states that in Zambia, a staggering 94% of the land is customary land. It belongs to the traditional communities. Only 6% of the country is held under statutory leaseholds for commercial use.
Right. 94 to 6.
When you first hear that, you think, that's it, they solved the puzzle. The people control 94% of their own nation. That is a massive macroeconomic victory.
It sounds like a triumph on paper.
Exactly. So why isn't Zambia an absolute utopia of decentralized wealth for its citizens? What am I missing?
What's fascinating here is that you are conflating sheer geographical volume with concentrated economic value.
Okay, explain that.
This is the brilliant sleight of hand of the monopoly system. Yes, the public holds 94% of the surface area, but what are they doing on it?
The survival farming we talked about.
Exactly. They are engaged in basic, rain-fed survival farming without the leverage of title deeds. They are economically quarantined on that 94%.
I see.
Now, look closely at that tiny, seemingly insignificant 6% held by the monopolies and cartels. What is located on that specific fraction of dirt?
The copper.
The world-class copper mines. The absolute beating heart of the Zambian macroeconomic engine.
Wow.
It is not about how much dirt you control. It is about what is underneath that dirt and how tightly it is integrated into the global financial system.
That is a terrifying realization. The monopolies don't need the whole country. They just need the precise coordinates of the billion-dollar aquifers and the massive copper veins.
Exactly. They don't want the burden of the whole country.
They extract the copper from that 6%, they load it onto private rail lines, ship it to international ports, and the billions of dollars generated in revenue are wired directly into global financial capitals.
And it completely bypasses the 94%.
Just flies right over their heads.
The traditional farmers living 20 miles away from a multi-billion-dollar open-pit copper mine experience virtually zero economic uplift from it. The wealth is entirely siloed.
It's surgical.
It is. The monopolies have optimized their footprint to maximize extraction while minimizing their engagement with the broader population.
We see the exact same architectural blueprint in Eswatini.
Yes, the pattern repeats.
The text breaks it down perfectly. 75% of the country is Swazi nation land. That is where the masses live, conducting survival farming that is completely, terrifyingly dependent on unpredictable rainfall.
One bad drought and you have a national crisis.
Exactly. But what about the other 25%? That is title deed land, and it is a completely different universe.
Night and day.
It is highly irrigated, perfectly manicured, utilizing the latest drone technology and fertilizer optimization to grow lucrative sugarcane and timber. And all of it is destined entirely for international export.
The pattern repeats with only slight local variations across the entire region. Look at the numbers provided from Malawi.
What are they?
An estimated 68 to 84% of the land is customary, heavily overcrowded and largely disconnected from global capital markets.
Right.
In Botswana, 71% is tribal land, while a highly concentrated 3% is private freehold reserved for intense, hyper-profitable commercial utilization.
So again, the public holds the volume, the elite hold the value.
Exactly.
But nothing prepares you for the statistics on Mozambique and Angola. This is where the structural reality becomes genuinely shocking.
The extreme example.
Yeah. According to the text, in these two nations, the citizens legally own 0% of the land.
Is zero.
The mathematical figure is literally zero. The state, the central government, owns 100% of the country by constitutional law. The people who have lived there for countless generations only...
No. The state utilizes its ownership to execute massive, multi-million hectare leases. These are known as concessions. And they lease them directly to foreign multinational cartels.
They bypass their own citizens entirely.
Completely.
They hand the keys to foreign logging syndicates, offshore oil giants, and international diamond mining operations. The citizens are literally just standing on the dirt, watching multinational corporations roll in with heavy machinery to rip the wealth from beneath their feet.
And all with the enthusiastic, legally binding blessing of their own government.
That is insane.
That is the crucial takeaway here. The extraction isn't some illegal operation happening in the shadows. It is the official, state-sanctioned business model of the nation.
When you look at numbers that are this overwhelmingly skewed, 13% versus 77%, 94% volume versus 6% value, and the absolute 0% ownership in Mozambique.
It begs a question.
Right. The natural human reflex, especially if you believe in democratic systems, is to look to the political arena for salvation. You think, well, the math is broken, so we just need to vote for a visionary, brave politician who will step into office, look at all this government-owned state land, and use it to fix the disparity.
A very common hope.
But the source material throws a massive bucket of cold water on that idea. It explicitly details why placing your hope in a political savior is a fundamental structural myth.
The text forces us to ask a very pragmatic, logistical question here. If the government already owns massive tracts of state land, why haven't they already solved the crisis?
Right. Why wait?
Why can't a newly elected, well-intentioned president simply draw up plans to build sprawling, affordable housing complexes, establish massive state-sponsored commercial farming hubs, and construct high-tech processing factories to employ the masses?
Right. Because if I'm the newly elected leader of a country, and my government directly controls 25% of the land mass, I should theoretically be able to deploy that asset to instantly elevate my population. I have the dirt, let's start building.
But you can't.
Exactly. The dossier outlines 3 massive, insurmountable roadblocks that prove why political power alone is virtually impotent when it goes up against structural monopolies.
Let's go through them.
What is the first roadblock?
The first roadblock is the inescapable reality of geography.
The nature of the land.
Yes, we cannot legislate the physical nature of the land itself. When we say the state owns millions of hectares in countries like Namibia, Botswana, or Zimbabwe, we are not talking about rolling, fertile, hyper-productive green pastures waiting for a plow.
What is it then?
A vast percentage of this state land is harsh, unforgiving desert. It is rocky, arid terrain with absolutely zero subterranean water access. Or, alternatively, it consists of strictly protected, ecologically fragile wildlife reserves.
Which you can't touch.
Right, because those reserves are the absolute backbone of the nation's multi-billion-dollar tourism industry.
So you literally cannot farm it. You can't drop a high-yield commercial farming hub into the middle of the Kalahari Desert, and you can't bulldoze a massive nature reserve to build affordable housing without collapsing your own tourism GDP.
Exactly. The land is physically incompatible with mass economic development.
Yeah, okay, but let's play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Let's say there was a pocket of beautiful, arable state land with great water access. The politician signs the order and hands the deed over to an impoverished farming community.
And I thought,
What happens then? Because this brings us to the second roadblock, the profound lack of capital.
this circles back to our earlier discussion regarding financial leverage. If a government transfers a beautiful, fertile piece of state land to an impoverished community, they have certainly solved the issue of location.
Sure, they have the dirt.
But the government itself is fundamentally broke. They are operating on razor-thin budgets, often heavily indebted to the IMF or the World Bank. They absolutely do not have the massive sovereign capital reserves required to simultaneously provide that community with heavy-duty tractors, advanced pivot irrigation systems, modern fertilizers, and the local processing plants required to make that land commercially viable.
So what does this all mean? It's a performative gesture.
Largely, yes.
Giving a starving man an empty 500-acre field doesn't miraculously transform him into a commercial agribusiness CEO. Without capital, he is exactly what he was yesterday, a starving man. He just happens to be standing in a larger field.
That is a harsh but accurate way to put it.
The state lacks the financial bandwidth to actually empower the people they are giving the land to. The dirt remains economically dormant because the financial ignition key is missing.
And that leads us to the third roadblock, which the text suggests is perhaps the most insidious because it deals with systemic political betrayal.
The political betrayal.
Yes. Even when arable state land is available, the government rarely hands it down to the impoverished public. Instead, the text argues that governments consistently lease the absolute best, most strategic state land right back to the cartels.
Just like we saw in Mozambique.
Exactly. This is exactly what we observed in the Mozambique model. The state owns 100%, but the lucrative logging, oil, and mineral rights are enthusiastically handed over to global monopolies.
Let's really dig into the psychology of that, though. Why would a politician who relies on the votes of the impoverished masses hand the best land to a foreign cartel?
Well, again, keeping our impartiality rule in mind, the text makes it clear that we aren't just attacking individual leaders as morally corrupt.
Right.
We are looking at the structural trap they are in.
That is a vital distinction.
This raises an important question. If the state apparatus, the entire government, is ultimately subservient to global capital, then state land alone will never be deployed to defeat the cartels.
Because they need them.
The reality is that the government desperately relies on the tax revenues, the massive foreign direct investment, and the physical infrastructure built by these monopolies just to keep the national economy from collapsing entirely.
They're holding the country together.
The cartel builds the roads to their mines. The cartel builds the power grid for their processing plants. The government needs them.
It fundamentally reframes what a politician actually is in this system. Voting a new person into power doesn't magically rewrite the laws of macroeconomics.
No, it doesn't.
You can change the face on the campaign posters, you can change the name of the ruling party, but the morning after the election, the government treasury is still broke, and the cartels still hold the absolute monopoly on global capital.
The politicians aren't the architects of the economy.
Right, they are just middle management administrators of a matrix that was designed long before they took office. And that matrix is explicitly engineered to protect the monopolies.
Precisely. They are managing a dependency. So if we conclude that the political apparatus is structurally incapable of saving the people using state land, we must examine the alternative.
Okay, what happens if the masses decide to bypass the government entirely? What if the people attempt to save themselves by building a parallel, decentralized economy on their own customary land?
The dossier spends significant time exploring this. It outlines what it calls the massive potential of the decentralized dream.
The decentralized dream.
And purely in theory, the logic is beautiful. The concept of a decentralized economy is one where wealth isn't immediately sucked upward into a singular multinational corporate vacuum. Instead, wealth is created locally, circulated locally, and shared locally.
The text asks us to envision a scenario where everything aligns perfectly. Imagine if citizens residing on communal land suddenly had access to highly fertile soil, guaranteed legal ownership to protect their assets, and actual robust financial backing.
A perfect storm of empowerment.
Yeah. They wouldn't just be growing maize to survive the winter. They could grow high-value crops, harvest them, and instead of selling the raw, cheap material to a cartel middleman, they could process it themselves in a locally owned factory.
Keep the value add.
Exactly. They could package it, sell it in a local market, and the profit margin would bounce around within the community. The mechanic gets paid, the local builder gets hired, the wealth stays geographically contained.
It is the ultimate vision of grassroots economic sovereignty.
It sounds like the perfect solution.
It does. But the text immediately violently pivots, pointing out that the reality blocking this decentralized dream is an impenetrable, heavily guarded fortress.
You can't just wish a local economy into existence when the structural gravity of the entire country is working against you.
Let us examine the walls of that fortress. First and foremost, we must look at the physical condition of the communal land itself.
Which we know is not great.
No. We established that the vast majority of the population is crowded onto a tiny fraction of the landmass. Generations of continuous survival farming on small plots, without access to modern restorative fertilizers or crop rotation technology, have severely depleted the soil.
So the land is physically exhausted.
It is yielding less and less caloric value every single year.
So you are starting with a depleted asset. And secondly, we slam right back into the banking blockade we discussed earlier.
A lack of title deeds.
Right. Let's say a community pools their meager resources and decides they want to build that local processing plant. They need $500,000 for the machinery and the warehouse. They go to the capitalist bank.
And we know how that ends.
The bank operates entirely on risk mitigation algorithms. No title deed equals no collateral. No collateral equals an automatic, categorical refusal to issue the business loan.
The people are entirely financially redlined. They are not allowed to participate in modern capital formation.
And trying to build an economy on communal land without a title deed or a bank loan is like trying to start a modern sports car without a battery. You have the vehicle, but absolutely zero spark to make the engine turn over.
That's a great way to look at it. And we must introduce the third and perhaps most suffocating wall of the fortress,
Which is?
the supply chain chokehold.
Oh, right.
Let us assume, hypothetically, that the community somehow circumvents the bank.
They find a way.
They crowdfund the money, they build the processing plant, and they are ready to scale. They immediately discover that the monopolies control the entire surrounding ecosystem. Who owns the patented high-yield seeds they need to plant?
The cartel.
Who owns the massive fertilizer production plants required to enrich their exhausted soil?
The monopoly.
Exactly. Who owns the massive supermarket chains and the distribution logistics required to actually sell their processed goods to the broader public?
The exact same cartels. You can build your little local factory, but you can't even get your goods to market without asking the monopoly for permission to use their supply chain.
Yeah. They will either refuse to stock your product, or they will offer you a wholesale price so low that it bankrupts you within a season.
The expert emphasizes that the people need more than just the dirt. They need water rights, infrastructure, and capital.
This is exactly why the source material is so adamant that passive policies will never work. The text insists that policies must forcefully compel monopolies to share the wealth that sustains them.
Otherwise, they're doomed.
It is not enough to simply hand the people the dirt. They require comprehensive infrastructure. They need water rights, which are frequently heavily privatized and hoarded by commercial agriculture.
Yeah.
They need physical roads capable of transporting heavy freight, and they need a consistent, reliable power grid to run their factories. If the overarching policy doesn't aggressively dismantle the cartel's chokehold on the entire supply chain, the people attempting to build a decentralized economy are merely participating in a more exhausting form of survival.
They aren't building an empire. They're just treading water with heavier boots on.
A very grim reality.
Now, it's not as if the governments are entirely blind to this tension. They are acutely aware that the monopolies hold the premium land, that the people are locked out, and that the tension is a powder keg.
They see happening.
So historically, governments have attempted to create specific legislative policies to peacefully transfer that profitable land back to the people. But the dossier shreds these attempts, calling the primary policy a massive mathematical failure.
It really does tear it apart.
Let's talk about the policy known as willing buyer, willing seller.
The willing buyer, willing seller policy is a fascinating study in attempting to merge historical justice with rigid market stability.
How does it work, ideally?
The premise, on paper, appears incredibly civilized and straightforward. The government acknowledges the historical imbalance in land ownership. However, to avoid terrifying international markets with forced expropriation, they adopt a passive market stance.
They don't want to spook the investors.
Exactly.
Oh,
So the
no.
government waits for a wealthy monopoly or a massive private commercial farmer who is voluntarily willing to sell their prime land at current market prices.
Okay.
The state acts as the willing buyer, utilizing national taxpayer funds to purchase the asset, and then redistributes that land to the impoverished, landless population.
I mean, it sounds perfect, doesn't it? No violence, no market panic, no draconian seizures, just a standard, polite real estate transaction.
On paper, yes.
But the text pulls decades of empirical proof, pointing specifically to the long-term outcomes in South Africa and Namibia to demonstrate exactly why this policy is catastrophically broken in practice.
The fatal flaw in the willing buyer, willing seller framework is a profound misunderstanding of human nature and corporate fiduciary duty.
Why does it fail?
The first and most obvious reason it fails is simply that monopolies do not want to sell their best assets.
Right. Why would they?
Exactly. Why on earth would they? We just established that they hold the highly concentrated 6% of land that produces billions in frictionless copper wealth, or the ultra-prime, perfectly irrigated agricultural estates dominating the international export market.
They are making a killing.
They are generating immense compounding wealth. They have absolutely zero financial or strategic incentive to voluntarily surrender the very foundation of their power base.
You don't sell the golden goose just because the government asks nicely.
You certainly don't.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Here's where the mechanism gets truly infuriating.
Hmm.
Let's say a cartel or a massive private trust does decide to engage with the policy and sell a block of land to the state. What are they actually selling?
Are they handing over their hyperproductive, laser-leveled, highly irrigated acreage?
Absolutely not.
No. The text points out that they strategically offload their poorest quality, least productive, most degraded tracts of land.
The garbage land.
And because the state is a desperate, willing buyer mandated by political pressure to acquire land, the sellers demand incredibly high, heavily inflated premium market prices for this subpar dirt.
And we must ask, who is financing that premium price tag?
It is the national treasury.
The taxpayer. The government is utilizing the tax revenues collected from a broader population, a population we've already established is suffering from massive youth unemployment and extreme poverty.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer devastating irony of this loop is staggering.
The impoverished citizens of the country are having their meager tax dollars pooled by the government, only for the government to hand those funds directly to the incredibly wealthy cartels to buy back the worst pieces of their own continent at a massive artificial markup.
It is a completely rigged game.
You are literally subsidizing the monopolies under the guise of land reform.
Which is why relying on the willing buyer, willing seller model is a structural dead end. It requires a fundamental reliance on power-hungry cartels to voluntarily, benevolently, and fairly surrender their dominance.
Which they won't.
History, basic macroeconomics, and the behavioral psychology of corporate boards all definitively prove they will never do this. The text insists that the serious political conversation must abandon this comfortable illusion.
You cannot buy your way out of a monopoly utilizing the exact pricing structure that the monopoly controls.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the ultimate climax of the Pod 7 dossier, Article 34. We've systematically closed every single conventional door.
We really have.
We established that the political apparatus cannot fix it using state land. We proved that the people cannot organically fix it on customary land because of the impenetrable banking and supply chain blockade. And we just dismantled the idea that the government can simply buy it back on the open market because the cartels rig the price.
Every traditional avenue is a trap.
So what is the actual functional solution? If politics, communal farming, and government buybacks all fail, what do we do?
The text presents Article 34, the illusion of the land war.
The illusion of the land war.
This specific section is where the synthesis of everything we've discussed across all 7 pods reaches its apex. The text issues a severe, almost stark warning against what it terms the political theater of fighting for land.
Okay, unpack that.
It labels the entire paradigm of aggressive land seizure as a devastating, naive illusion if it is not paired with sovereign capital.
It outlines a hypothetical scenario that perfectly illustrates the trap, right?
Yes.
Let's imagine you ignore everything we just said. You engage in the ultimate political war for land reform. You mobilize the masses, you change the Constitution, you aggressively seize the freehold land, and you forcefully hand a historically impoverished man the title deed to 100 acres of prime commercial soil today.
A total victory for the revolution.
He has the paper, he has won the physical dirt, the revolution is victorious. But tomorrow morning, the sun comes up. He walks out onto his 100 acres, and he faces reality.
The reality of capital.
Exactly. He still cannot afford a single commercial tractor. He cannot afford the massive quantities of specialized fertilizer required to yield a commercial crop. He cannot afford the diesel to run the irrigation pumps. He has won the land, but he possesses absolutely zero operational capital.
So what is his only available move?
What does he do?
His only move is to seek leverage. He holds the title deed now, so he finally has collateral. Therefore, he has to walk right back into the pristine lobby of the exact same centralized capitalist banking cartels that he just spent a decade fighting a political war
Wow,
against.
man.
He has to sit across from the monopolies loan officer and beg them for the capital injection required to develop his newly acquired asset.
And the most insidious part is that the bank will happily fund him.
Of course they will.
They aren't going to turn him away now that he has the deed. They will welcome him with open arms, but they will structure the loan under terms designed to absolutely crush his sovereignty.
Precisely. The Monopoly Bank will issue the multi-million-dollar agricultural loan, but at exorbitant compounding interest rates.
Naturally.
They will attach covenants demanding he only purchase seed and fertilizer from their approved subsidiary monopolies. They will mandate that he sell his final harvest exclusively to their distribution network at a prefixed below-market wholesale rate.
So he's trapped again.
The man never becomes a sovereign, wealthy, independent landowner. The text makes this brutally clear. He merely transitions into becoming a heavily indebted cheap laborer on his own newly acquired soil.
He assumes all the physical risk of farming, while his labor works entirely to service the monopoly's interest rates.
Even in victory, he is structurally re-enslaved by the financial mechanism.
This is a guaranteed mathematical path to re-enslavement. And, this realization is the exact reason why the 30K Club exists.
But this is their specific calculated intervention.
The text argues that true, lasting economic liberation isn't about engaging in a political knife fight with the oppressor over the rules of their own system. True liberation is about completely bypassing that system.
The architects behind the 30K Club recognized a fundamental macroeconomic truth. Capital, not just land, is the ultimate systemic choke point.
Right.
If you exhaust your energy fighting for a plot of land without possessing independent, massive, parallel capital to develop it, you have already lost the war.
You need both.
Therefore, the club does not operate as a political lobbying group. It operates as a fully funded, parallel financial and spiritual infrastructure. They heavily, aggressively invest millions of dollars directly into their members.
Listen, you've heard about the clean ritual backing, you've heard the terrifying economic math, and now you see the final trap of the land war. The 30K Club provides the massive capital and the ritual backing to bypass this exact suffering, so that when a member of the 30K Club inevitably acquires a massive tract of land, they never have to experience that humiliating walk into the cartel's bank lobby.
They don't need their money.
They never have to beg the monopolies for a predatory loan. They never have to accept the seed covenants or the fixed-price distribution contracts. They already hold the capital in their own hands.
Exactly. We noted earlier that knowledge is only valuable when applied. The 30K Club represents the extreme application of this structural knowledge.
Putting it into practice.
It allows its members to actually build that decentralized dream we explored earlier. Because they possess sovereign capital, they can build the local processing factories, they can import the advanced irrigation systems, and they can secure their own independent supply chains without ever asking for the permission or the financing of the cartels.
They are completely self-sufficient.
You possess both the immense financial capital to execute scale and the clean, self-accountable ritual backing to dictate your terms to the market. You are no longer a dependent begging for inclusion. You are operating as a sovereign entity.
I want to speak directly to you, listening right now. Take a step back and look at the massive tapestry we have woven together from Pods 1 all the way through to Pod 7.
It is a vast picture.
In our early sessions, you heard the mentors' explicit warnings about the dark, parasitic killing orders operating in the unseen realms. The tragic, desperate blood rituals where individuals sacrifice the life force of their own families just to secure a temporary, cursed slice of the cartel's wealth.
We covered that in depth.
You heard about the absolute necessity of the clean, self-accountable ritual backing provided by the 30K Club, an oath that actively protects human life and demands moral accountability rather than destroying it.
Essential context.
You've reviewed the terrifying economic math, the reality of millions surviving on nothing while youth unemployment skyrockets and the continent's wealth is wired offshore. And now you see the final, inescapable trap of the physical land war. The cartels own the best land, they own the global banks, they own the supply chains, and they rig the political policies to ensure they never lose.
It is a closed loop of extraction.
But the 30K Club is presented in these texts as the exact, perfectly engineered counterforce. It isn't just a spiritual philosophy, and it isn't just a venture capital fund. It is the fusion of both.
A complete system.
It provides the massive capital injection required to develop the earth and the supernatural authority to bypass the spiritual and systemic suffering inflicted by the monopolies.
It is, in the truest sense of the word, a complete structural bypass.
It neutralizes the power of the monopoly by entirely removing the members' dependency on their financial systems.
You wield the capital required to forcefully develop the land and create actual generational wealth. And crucially, you carry the heavy moral burden of the clean oath to ensure that you are building a thriving civilization rather than simply replacing the cartel and becoming an oppressor yourself.
And with that synthesis, we have completely thoroughly exhausted the massive source material across all of these deep dives.
We have covered it all.
Every single angle of the economic, spiritual, and structural reality of Southern Africa, exactly as it is presented in these texts, has been laid out before you on the table. We've scrutinized the grim mathematics, we've mapped the physical divisions of the land, we've dismantled the political myths, and we've examined the ultimate parallel solution proposed by the order.
The blueprints are fully exposed.
The text insists, without any ambiguity, that there is absolutely nothing standing between you and taking immediate action if you recognize that you need this clean ritual backing. The registry is fully open, and your specific eligibility can be checked right now at 30k.club.
I think we must ground this entire exploration in one final realization.
What's that?
To absorb this profound level of structural insight. Well, to truly understand the exact grinding mechanisms of the banking blockades, to see the reality of the land monopolies, to comprehend the complete failure of political theater, and to understand the dual nature of the spiritual forces at play. To internalize all of that and then simply walk away without making a conscious, deliberate choice about your alignment. To do that is to actively choose the illusion.
Passivity is a choice.
Passivity is a surrender to the status quo.
You are either consciously utilizing parallel capital and clean spiritual backing to build a new civilization, or you are, by default, laboring every single day to maintain the architecture of your own poverty. I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over as we close out this massive journey. It's a concept that builds on everything we've just discussed, but turns the power dynamic entirely upside down. The text states very clearly that monopolies, despite their billions in revenue and their massive land holdings, produce absolutely nothing on their own.
They are entirely parasitically dependent on the very masses they exploit.
Their power is entirely an illusion sustained by our participation. They rely completely on your daily labor, your constant consumption, your desperate need for their loans, and your compliance to maintain the multi-billion-dollar value of their empire.
Without that, they have nothing.
So ask yourself this. What happens to the oppressor's grand, impenetrable empire the exact moment a fully funded, spiritually backed parallel economy simply decides to stop playing their game?